Hi guys, and thank you for tuning in and watching this video. So today you may notice I'm slightly unbearded, beardless. I actually shaved it off for a number of gigs that I was doing with the band that required a certain look, so I did it. And I cut my hair and I changed my vibe. And why not? And why not? Yes, anyway, so I'm here with a cup of tea with my Mr. Noisy mug. It's a Friday and I'm off to the studio shortly to do a few lessons. So if you're interested in some lessons, just give me a holler, whether they be in person or online. But this is going to be another little chat about an artist. So I think I've done one on the Monkees and Gary Newman and one on the Beatles possibly, can't remember, Kate Bush. And this one is on Miles Davis. When I was really struggling to understand jazz, when I was about maybe, 11 or 12, my dad was playing me these records. And I was really trying to get on top of what it was all about. The swing rhythm, the way the melody or the tune would be at the start and the end. And in the middle was just all these guys that seemed to be just going for it. As a young 10-year-old might say, they're having it. And then later on I sort of understood heads, solos, forms. But at that time, it was all a bit kind of like, oh, what's going on? And Miles is a character. I think Jerry Crozier Cole, who's a good friend of mine and a great guitarist, lent me the autobiography. And it's just incredible, reading about what all these black artists had to go through back in the day, just to be heard, and the way they used to work. And a lot of that book really stuck with me. Some of the stuff that, he would just practice and practice and practice, and he had this vision that he was going to be successful and a popular musician, and he made these things happen. And there's something out there about putting things out into the universe, I think, and things come back, but that's for a whole nother video. But I love the way that he was strong like that. He had a vision, he had a sound, and he wasn't playing bebop like some of the bebop players, because he had the technique to do some of that, but he decided to do it in a different way. And he was brave enough to do that, as was Chet Baker and a few other great musicians. And maybe there's a lesson to be learned for all of us musicians in that. But it's also the way that Miles, his fashion sense, he was so cool. Whatever decade you see him in, through all the changes, he was always right on top of an image and a look, and it was always so cool. But more importantly, going back to the music, it was the way that he was tirelessly moving forward. He could have easily have stayed in the kind of blue kind of mode all of his life. Some jazz musicians and rock and pop musicians or classical people do. They find the thing and sort of stick with it and then just keep rehashing that. He decided to keep moving forward. So, every sort of 5-10 years or whatever, you're seeing a progression every time, and he's always looking for younger musicians to fuel that passion that he's got. Obviously, they bring ideas in, and he's not stupid, so he uses some of their ideas, but then kind of molds it to something that he can do and moves it forward, and there's a genius in that. So all that stuff with Miles, and there's a romance as well. When I was growing up, of learning jazz, going down to the farmhouse in Bath, which I've spoken of before, which used to be on Lansdowne Hill, owned by the amazing John and Mary Bradshaw. And I think it was every Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Sunday they had jazz. Sometimes it was a trad band, sometimes it was a modern band, sometimes it was a funk band, sometimes it'd be not jazz at all, they'd have something else in there. Because I did a Beatles tribute in there one night. And maybe an original band in there as well one time to just rehearse it. He was like, yeah, sure, bring them up. So there was that lovely period, and I was 20, 21, just moved into Bath, and I lived just up the road in a little kooky little bedsit, which is kind of funky and quirky. The Opium Jazz Den, my friend called it, but the only opium in there would have been perfume. Yeah, and it was just such a hip thing. And CDs were the thing at the time, so I'd stop buying vinyl, and I'd go into the local jazz CD shop and say to Ned Bennett, who worked there, he was a great sax player as well, what can I listen to? I need something trio-wise, I need something kind of romantic. I need something really heavy, hard hitting, something that I'm going to buy that makes me go, oh, I don't get it. And he would say, okay, you need to listen to this. And I bought all these CDs, and I'd take them home late night after the gig. I would put it in a CD machine, maybe with some company, and we'd sit and listen to it or whatever. It was just a great time, and I feel like, you know, I paid my dues gigging for very little money at the farmhouse at the time. But, you know, there, and those CDs and those artists that I found at that time are really part of that. So I've got a bit of that as well, and I think that's really quite important. And I think the way that Miles kept changing inspired me much deeper than I could ever imagine. I probably still can't quite, you know, realise that now, to be honest. You know, because like if you look at like the mid-60s, which unfortunately I haven't got some of those mid-60s albums here. I've got Nefertiti and Sorcerer and some of those records, but I've only got about 200 here of the 500 or so that I own. And I could have sworn it was here, but anyway. But the way those albums kept changing and moving forward, and the musicianship and the way he could be a bit of a chameleon and change himself around is a kind of genius, really. The vinyl albums I do have here, the first one is this one, Milestones, which was bought, I remember well, we used to go down to see my nan in Portsmouth, or Pompey, as my dad used to call it. And we used to go to their big record shop there. Was it a Tower? No, it wouldn't have been a Tower. I can't remember what it was, but they had a huge record shop there, and part of the deal was I'd always be like saving my pocket money up because they would have imports, and I was into the Beatles at the time. Well, I still am, but I used to go and buy a lot of their imports. They'd be in there. They'd be quite pricey, 15 quid or something, or maybe a bit less than that back in the day. But then one day he came bounding back round the aisle, from the jazz aisle down to where I was, and he said, look, I've got this. And I was like, and? Kind of. And he said, you've got to hear this record. I had this, you know, when I was like in my early 20s. You've got to listen to this. It's one of the greatest albums. Philly Joe Jones is on drums. Obviously John Coltrane, Red Garland, Paul Chambers, Cannonball Adderley, and of course Miles himself. He said, you've got to listen to this record. So I remember when we got home, he put it on, and the track Billy Boy on here, where Philly Joe Jones is playing drum breaks with the band, moving from brushes then onto sticks. It just was one of the first things that blew my mind after he played me Buddy Rich, which I kind of got, because it was like, oh my God, that's just drumming, and lots of it. Then I heard this, and it was like, hang on. And then a bit later on, I realised that things like Two Bass Hit, Milestones, and Straight No Chaser, which is on here, were kind of standards, and would be played a lot of depping gigs and pickup gigs and jam sessions. So whenever I used to play some of those tunes, my brain used to go straight back to the album, and I'd think, right, what did Philly do? And I'll do my best to blag it, you know, probably speeding up, slowing down, and getting all excited, and, you know, playing too loud, which is a whole other thing, you know, when you're young and you just want to play. But this album's brilliant. It's amazing. Obviously, the one before this, I haven't got on Kind of Blue. When I say before it, I mean Kind of Blue is a classic, and I don't actually have that on vinyl, which is not good. I need to get it. But this album's brilliant, so this one stands out. And also I've got things like some of the Prestige stuff, like Steaming as well. And to be honest with you, I've got all this catalogue from the 50s and 60s on CD, but since the move they're in a like a tea chest in there, and I just can't face getting them all out because I'm really enjoying playing vinyl again. But that album, you know, Milestones and Steaming, Working with Miles, all those records, and Kind of Blue, which of course has got Jimmy Cobb drumming on it, which is amazing, cemented in me a certain style of jazz drumming, cool, modern jazz drumming, listening to the way they played the cymbal, listening to everything about their execution, what they were doing, how they bring things up, bring things down, the difference between Jimmy Cobb being more mellow, I would say, and Philly Joe was more sparky and, you know, like a firecracker jumping up behind the kit, you know. Both of them were like an A and a B, and it's like, that's classic, that's classic. No one's better, it's subjective. Some days I want Jimmy Cobb more, some days I want Philly Joe more. Interesting. So in me, let's just put them both in and then swirl them around a bit, and then it comes out as something else. So those records to me are phenomenal. As I say, I haven't got the mid-60s. I'd love to pull up Sorcerer now and Nefertiti. There they are, great looking records. And I think I've got one other as well, can't think which one it is. from that period. But that's a great period because that's when he obviously had Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter and Tony Williams in the band, and that was the next amazing quintet, and probably my favourite. I like this early one because it's setting out the stall of modern jazz. Coltrane had his thing, Sonny Rollins, all those artists, Dave Brubeck, they're all setting their stalls out, and it's like, here we go, these are some classic sounds which all of you are going to be copying for the next 50, 100 years, pretty much. Milestones means a lot because of, it was one of my dad's favourite records. But, that mid-60s period is really where I used to sit down and put on Nefertiti and listen to the title track Nefertiti, which is basically a drum solo over the top of an ostinato that the horns are playing. And it blew my mind. It's like, how? What? That's not possible. And I sat there and I listened to that, and it was just incredible. And his drumming on all his albums, listening to his ride cymbal playing. I'd have it on CD, and I'd be sat there with my Walkman, and I'd sort of sit there in bed listening to this stuff, and then it would just blow my mind. And you can't ever get those years back. It's so exciting. It's when you first get that album and you're sat there listening to it, and you realise that you haven't stopped staring at the cover or looking out the window or something, or staring at the floor. And that's the power of music, when it can transform you like that. And I've got loads of really fond memories of Miles doing that to me. Another classic which I had to get, Bitches Brew. I got this when I was on tour with Lorena McKinnett a couple of years ago. It's on the We Are Vinyl label, and it's brilliant. It's great. I love it. It's fusion madness. It's best. And when I say madness, I don't mean that in a rude way. It's just, I love the way that when he was making that album, and also this one, which I think I like slightly more, which is In a Silent Way, which again I bought on tour when I was out with Lorena McKinnett a few years ago. And I like this because they call this this little period Directions in Music by Miles Davis, and Jack Johnson's the same, and that's another one I need to get on vinyl. I've got it on CD, I need to get it on vinyl. I want to get the box set actually, whether it be CD or vinyl, if they still do one or the other of the Jack Johnson set sessions, because it's just great. I love that because the records, and they don't even try not to tell you, but they recorded bits and then they just splice it up and make songs from those ideas. And I think that's a great way of making music. Jam an idea out, stop, then do another one. It could last 5 minutes, could last 10 minutes. But if you like a bit, say, right, we'll have that bit. We'll then put that on the same groove that we did a minute ago. We'll splice that onto that. It's like early ways of kind of copy, cut and paste, It's like early version of that. And some of the splices are obvious, but it doesn't matter. It becomes more about what the music is saying in the way it's been put together. No one sat down, with a quill and some music and written it out, or just written out the head on a bit of paper like you see on Kind of Blue, and it's on their stand. If you've got that book, is it by Ashley Kahn? I think it is. And there's pictures of, I think it's Cannonball Adderley's stand with cigarettes and some of his medication, and his reeds and these little bits of paper of that. That's what the head is. Oh, right, okay. And then boom, off we go. It wasn't even that. It was kind of like, let's obviously learn what we're playing and then just jam it out, see where it goes. But we're not looking for a take, we're looking for takes. And I really like the way they can suddenly throw bits in. So as I say, the splice might be a bit air sucked out of the room and it goes into a mellow bit or something else, but that's fine. It's okay. We're not looking for perfection here. The perfection is in how he put that together and how he sort of like a collage of music. And certainly when I'm doing my own album, I'm very inspired by that idea of just going, that works with that. Well, it doesn't quite have the right, diminuendo, or, this doesn't crescendo properly. It's like, so what? It's okay. Just let's put them together. It's going to be great. People are going to dig it. They're going to believe it if they hear it. And that's kind of what happens. So the playing on this is great. The playing on all of these records is great, but it's not really, at this point, it's not really about the solos. It's more about the interplay and, as I say, the way the music has been spliced together and the way it works out at the end of the day in this collage of vibe. And it's, again, a brave move by Miles to do that. He easily, at this point, could have still been playing So What, and all these sort of steaming albums and playing all those standards that are on these. Very easily in concert halls and stuff all around the world. And then, of course, you get to the 80s, and this is Electric Period, which, again, I've got on CD, like Cure Under Arrest, Decoy, We Want Miles. I've got all that on CD. And I've got even the bootleg he made with Prince somewhere in there as well. And his very last album, Doo-Bop. I'm sure it's called Doo-Bop, where he's playing with like rappers and hip-hop kind of musicians, and that's really cool too. And he looks fly in that picture, you know. And in the 80s, he's wearing polka dot shirts like Prince, and he's very influenced by Prince at that point. He was at Lynn Drums, and I think, you know, obviously being a Prince fan, I would like it, but I think it's great. He was looking at the next generation and saying, okay, what have you guys got? What can I sort of get from you guys to move forward? And Prince was definitely the man of the time, pop star of the time, who could play all his instruments and blah blah blah. And he was obviously a big jazz fan and loved Miles too, so there's nothing better than getting those two together. It was going to obviously work out just fine. So Miles Davis, it's the legend, you know. It's huge, it's the music, it's tireless, you know, fight for human rights. It's his effortless change of styles and techniques. His fashion is just everything about him was just strong, bold, and you know, I can't say I like every single album. There's certain things in that mid-70s period. I think it's called Circles, that album, a live one, that I've got. But you know, some of those things I don't play a lot. You know, now and again I'll put them on and I really like it. And other times I'll put it on and maybe halfway through or quarter way through I'll bring the needle off and think, nah, not today. And that's how music should be. You know, you shouldn't have a Miles fan there going, you shouldn't be doing that, you should listen to it all the time. That's not how it works. That's not how it works for any of the artists that I love. Miles generally has got something in his catalogue, mood-wise and vibe-wise, that is going to speak to me at most times. On the Corner is another great record. You know, I could name them all. They're all brilliant. But if you're watching this and you don't know Miles and you're thinking of diving in, some of the albums I've spoken about here could be a good way to start. Kind of Blue, Milestones, Nefertiti, Bitches Brew. It's a bit scary, that one, but it's a great record. Silent Way, definitely. On the Corner is an amazing one. 80s stuff, You're Under Arrest and Decoy, I think, are two really classic records. And Man with the Horn is good, you know. But have a little look online. There's plenty of people who can direct you to stuff. But you know, do check it out, because it's not just Miles. It's all the instruments, the instrumentation, the production, the cover, the instrumentalist, everything else around it is good too. It's not like he's just holding the show on his own. It's everybody that's involved. You can read the covers or CD booklet or download, you know, whatever, and just find out what else was going on around him at that time, why he was changing his sound, you know, why did he go to electronic instruments? Because of Jimi Hendrix and Sly Stone and James Brown. Those people were turning him on, and he wanted a bigger audience that wasn't just a chin-stroking jazz audience. He wanted to play rock festivals, and he did. He was on the same bills as The Who, Led Zeppelin and the Buddy Rich Big Band and Santana. You know, it's incredible to think that, because nowadays you just get a rock festival, a jazz festival, a classical, folk. Then they used to chuck the Fillmore clubs in San Francisco and New York. They just used to throw loads of bands in together. So you'd get The Who on, you know, with Buddy Rich Big Band, with Dusty Springfield, with Led Zeppelin, and with Miles Davis headlining or something. That's just how it was. And isn't that cool? And I've seen those posters because I've played those two clubs with Susie Sue. We did 2 nights at each venue, or was it 3, when we were there. And it was awesome. So, anyway, I could talk about Miles for hours. He's somebody that, as you can see, excites me. He gets the old juices flowing. Miles Davis, genius. Thank you, sir, for the great work. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found a few things out. As a drummer, there's so many things to check, from Jack DeJohnette to Tony Williams, Jimmy Cobb, Philly Joe Jones, and then the later ones. But if you're into your jazz, those drummers that are playing in that period, that 40-year period or so, there's something to be learned there. Same for pianists, same for guitarists, same for bass players, same for sax players and trumpeters, you know. Just listen to the music, take it in, osmosis, take it all in, take in the vibes, because it's all out there to be had. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've any comments, please put them below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and also the bell, so you get notified each time I throw one of these things out, which is every Tuesday and every Friday, God willing, or aliens willing, or whoever. Okay, so take care, guys. Keep enjoying music, keep enjoying drumming, keep enjoying life, and I shall see you soon.